So welcome everybody to my first webinar on the ISC Square Certified Cloud Security Professional, or CCSP for short. As you'll see, I do a lot of cloud security, but CCSP is definitely the new kid on the block. And I'm really looking forward to hearing your questions and views on that. I got some of them already, so thank you very much for that. I've tried to weave a lot of that into the presentation. But do feel free to come back to me with questions in the chat box, please. And if you don't get enough answers, just drop me an additional line afterwards. So what we will cover today is a bit of material on really what's this change that's driving the new IT, and what's IT in the 21st century. Again, please mute yourself if I haven't done so for you already. So what does IT look in the 21st century? And then why do we get cloud, and how do we get cloud security in there? What is CCSP? What's the role of that? What are some other certifications, questions I will answer? I will also talk about how to actually get CCSP certified, should you aspire to that, and a little bit about how to convince your boss to help you with that, because it would help if they give you the time and money to do that. So first of all, a little bit about me. My name is Peter van Eyck, and I'm one of the world's most experienced independent cloud trainers. I've delivered dozens of training really to hundreds of students worldwide. I think it was 13 countries at last count. I'm a certified trainer for CCSK, which is right now the most popular cloud security certification. I'll be running edition 37 next week. I wrote a chapter of the CCSP body of knowledge, and I'm planning to be a trainer for that. I wrote Cloud Adoption Essentials, which is a training that I did by myself. I was a co-author of Professional Cloud Technology Associate, which is organized by the Cloud Credential Council. CompTIA Cloud Essentials I did. I was also Master Trainer, Virtualization Essentials. Professionally, I worked at the University of Twente, where I started. I did my PhD there. Then I moved to IT services. EDS, as you may know, taken over by HP. It's their services arm, which got me a significant feel for what IT services look like when you actually deliver them rather than just talking about them. I did a brief stint at an internet provider, which was a very interesting additional experience. And then I moved to Deloitte Consulting and do some more management strategy stuff. And if somebody finds an unmuted phone, please chat to the person in particular. Okay, sorry about that interruption. And I'm a board member of the Dutch Cloud Security Alliance chapter, which we will get to in a moment as well. So the point that I was making is that IT is outgrowing the capability of organizations to manage it. You need more and more IT. You need to be more and more productive with IT, which means that the chances that a random organization is capable of actually managing all that is getting smaller and smaller. By the way, I've muted you for a moment, but you're supposed to be able to unmute yourself if you have a question. So security is also getting harder. So there's a couple of reasons why IT is becoming too complicated for organizations, and that's just one of the drivers of cloud computing. Now back to my presentation. Right. So cloud is just another disruptive innovation that we have seen in the past decades. IT has been of commercial usage since the early 60s, and there have been a couple of big breaking trends along the way. Now, my IT career, I could argue, starts somewhere in the 70s, and I've seen a number of those changes, and cloud is the third or the fourth innovation of that scale, and arguably the largest. I'm not that sure. Well, in a number of ways, the cloud is bigger than the change from mainframe to client server. So this is a significant and disruptive innovation. And by the way, the word disruptive actually means something. It's not just a marketing word. But unfortunately, we don't have the time to get into that. So it's not just about all those buzzwords like the iCloud and Dropbox and what have you. It's a fundamentally different new delivery model. And we're just beginning to understand how fundamentally different it is, and especially what kinds of new ways of doing business are enabled by cloud. We're just beginning to understand that. Now let's have a peek inside cloud, just a brief peek. Here is infrastructure as a service. And what you can see, and let me get to a pointer here. And what you can see is, okay, here, you're supposed to be able to see my red dot coming along. Anyway, and by the way, if you have any comments, questions, also feel free to use the chat box. If you don't really want to interrupt me, but want to make a comment, I really appreciate that. Even, smileys and what have you. So this is just a let's say, very simplified view of what a infrastructure as a service provider looks like. And here the compute nodes and the storage nodes, these are the biggies. In reality, you have thousands of these in a private cloud or millions of these in a public cloud. Moving up the scale, let's move along. Hold on, I need to find my advanced button. There it is. That was infrastructure as a service. Now, platform as a service is a layer of software on top of that, where a multitude of applications run that are basically ignorant of the amount of hardware that they run on. And to see how that works in practice is an example in this picture, where all the traffic is redirected by load balancers across a server array, either web application or just web. And of course, one load balancer isn't really a load balancer. That's a single point of failure. So you have multiple, and you make it resilient through the proper DNS. You can actually measure this. This is really interesting. I did that a couple of years ago. So you have a ton of yellow servers here, and these are supposed to be stateless. That's an important model. And because they're stateless, you have to store the state somewhere else. So you have the cache servers here on the left, the green things, and you have the orange database servers. So in an e-commerce site, for example, in the cache server, you would store your let's say your shopping basket, and the database server would store your orders. And just simplified. Reality, of course, is different. And to accommodate load changes, the yellow ones in particular will be auto-scaled, and they will go up and down like a pair of kangaroos in the mating season. So there will be 100 in one moment, or 1,000 in one moment, and 10 in the next hour or so. That's a lot of hardware and a lot of machinery and a lot of complexity. And the complexity is even worse. Now here's an example of a integration of applications into an application landscape. Now you can substitute your own favorite products there. I just happen to be familiar with this example because that was done by a company, a non-profit organization I worked with. The whole point is that you'll have your SaaS application on the top, and it has a sort of inside the box, it has a PaaS platform. The reason why that is because you may want to have more functionality here than the top system will actually give you a user interface to. For example, in the company that I was working with, they would store their members. Now, you would also want to email members, but emailing members out of a CRM system is not necessarily the best thing to do. It's a specialized job, and it's best and actually specified specific, let's say, data objects that are relevant, such as mail groups and campaign results, and they are shuttled back and forth between those two providers. And you could do that integration yourself, or the providers could do that for you. In this particular case, the provider does it for you, but you could also do it yourself with integration platforms. And it doesn't end there. You could do event management. I don't have a product name here because I forgot it, but it's a real example. So they're still using that. And that's where you sell your attendance. You sell your tickets and record attendance. Now, in the end, of course, you want to have that information pushed back into your CRM system. So what you see here appear, wrong button. What you see appear here is that you're creating an application landscape where passes the glue between all those components. And all those components live outside of your company perimeter. And somebody's doing the integration, maybe you, maybe somebody else. So you're creating cloud creates an enormous ecosystem. Now, the ecosystem does have its own challenges. Here's a more realistic supply chain, where you would say, well, we have consumers here, and the average consumer, let's say the business consumer, I'm not talking about people with beards and laptops in coffee shops. I'm talking about enterprises. They will have a ton of SaaS applications. The average enterprise readily has a couple of dozen, and some even have a couple of hundred SaaS applications. They run on some intermediate platform, or they make use of some intermediate platform, as I explained in the previous picture. And then that runs on a couple of public infrastructure as a service providers, typically. And those are fewer in number than the SaaS providers. Big question is, who is in control? So we have a lot of complication here. The cloud, in summary, is very complicated on the inside. Somebody's managing that complexity, and they better do that. And it's good that they do that, because you wouldn't be able to do that with like even 100 staff, IT. You won't be able to handle this type of complexity. So you need to outsource, and you need to get that going. So cloud adoption in companies is unavoidable. I mean, resistance is futile, so to say. There's a couple of reasons why cloud is the future of IT. It is happening now, and it also enables new things. And the majority of businesses are already using it, and it's not going to stop. It's going to get bigger. I'm not going to say it's worse, but it's going to get bigger. And what people say, well, security and its twin sisters, governance and compliance, are listed as the #1 obstacle for cloud adoption, and for good reason. Because if you mess up big, and you can make really, really expensive and dangerous mistakes. At the same time, by harnessing the power of cloud, you can do amazing things. You can set up things in hours that used to take years. More importantly, cloud enables fundamentally new things. DevOps is one example. If you fully automate the test and deployment process, you make it possible for developers to push code to production in a matter of minutes. Now, obviously, there has to be quality control on that, but it can be done. It's demonstrated that it can be done. And the business advantages of that level of agility are tremendous. Cloud enables big data. You want to crunch data on a couple of petabytes and only do that once or twice a week. Without a cloud computing model, that is economically not viable. So cloud makes it possible to do that. Now, it's your problem to turn that into a business advantage, but you can imagine that having, let's say, better crunch the data will give you better insight into your business. And you only have to be a few percent better than the competitor. And the final thing here is that cloud is the new platform for application deployment, or as a matter of fact, even application development. If you're architecting an application currently, a new application, and you're thinking in terms of where do I put my servers, or how many servers do I need, then you're so old school that your career is in danger. If you want to really think out of the box, then you're talking about random pieces of code that get executed on various places in the cloud and work together. Now, that has advantages and also has challenges. Now, I'm not talking much about the, let's say, intricacies of how to do this. I'm just pointing out that cloud is unavoidable, that it's complicated, and that the most interesting thing about cloud is not how to move your server from your data center to the cloud, but how you are going to enable new things with the cloud. So what are people typically doing in the cloud? Well, they're typically in one of three phases. Either they are trying to get awareness of cloud. There's some stuff happening. See how it works. Then they're trying to get some benefits by picking low-hanging fruits. That's what I call an opportunistic strategy. And then finally, third, you could think some companies, or a lot of companies, are actually strategically building cloud capabilities, and some of them are even moving into a cloud-native strategy. And Netflix is just one big example of that. Now, you might think that these are only the advanced, tech companies or startups, but it's also done in banks. Banks are using cloud, and when they're talking to cloud providers, they're requesting security features. On the right hand side, you see a ton of things that they desire. And if you look at the top features desired from cloud providers, and we're not talking about the top, how would I say, security features, we're talking about the top features. And most of that is around governance, risk management, and security. Where are you in your adoption of cloud? It would be fun if you could have a moment and spend a few lines, put a few lines in the chat box to describe what your current situation is. Nobody's putting anything in the chat box. Okay. Yep. So one guy's answering in Dutch. You should excuse him for that. No worries, Willem. I know your situation. And we're getting more people on the call, which is interesting because you're basically 25 minutes late. Never mind. We have some kind of recording, hopefully. Anyway, let's get on with this and see if we have time for some Q&A. So, cloud is a form of outsourcing, but it has new and important characteristics that change the security posture with relation in contrast to cloud sourcing as we know it. So it's not just cloud sourcing, it's more complicated than outsourcing. It's not totally them or us. Where classic outsourcing was, we take care of all your shit, so to say. And in a cloud context, you do part of it, or it depends on the model how much you do. So resources are shared and flexible, which has advantages, but it also has disadvantages because it brings new risk. And then, of course, cloud brings ubiquitous access, also by bad guys. Now, I think this is overplayed. In general, you would say that your average data center is not safe anymore either. So your mileage may vary. There's more to that. Now, if you want to have a list of what are typical cloud-specific risks, I suggest that you have a look at the ENISA document. And if you want to have the quick 411 on that, search my name on YouTube with Club Cloud Computing and ENISA Top 8 Risks, and you'll get a 5-minute video on this with a little bit more detail. So part of this is governance, really, but part of this is also technical. And for example, the isolation failure has very strong technical roots, so to say. But other stuff is really about who is actually doing what and making sure that the right people are doing the right thing. Security is of course, it's hard, but if you put enough brains to it, enough smart people to it, it's all pretty doable. So let's move on to an example of this. One example, for example, I'm using the word example too much. Management interface compromised. Now, what does that mean? Basically, it means that somebody hacks into your management portal. And here's an example of a company called CodeSpaces that basically shut down last year because they had somebody hacking into their Amazon EC2 control panel, who was deleting most of the data, the backups, machine configurations, basically everything. And beyond that, after that, they concluded that they would not be able to operate. So they went out of business. And if you go to the website right now, codespaces.com, it's still there. You'll see that it points to one of their competitors. Like, dear customers, we're unable to serve you at this time, but we suggest that you go to, I forgot the name of the competitor. And this is an example of one of those cloud-specific risks that would have been very easily avoided. As a matter of fact, I have a one-page security note, cloud security note, and explains exactly what you need to do to prevent this. Actually, there's two controls I mentioned there. And if you if you implement those two controls, that they would either one of them would have saved this company. I suppose. Let me make a note. I'm going to send out that note to you, and you can tell me something about it. I'm calling it Cloud Security 101. Anyway, out of business. You don't want to be out of business. So a lot of this is about whose problem is it, and can we actually have it somebody else's problem, or a particular person's problem, or a company's problem. And as I said, if you have the wrong answer, either you have risk, you have non-compliance, or you have loss of business, or all three of them. The good news is that if you select the right cloud provider, they are probably better at security than you are. And that's not a random statement. If you look at the big data breaches that happened in last year and this year, you'll see that, well, slightly depending upon your definition, in some definitions, most of them are non-cloud, and in some definitions, all of them are non-cloud. So if you get any hack that happens, probably did not happen in the cloud. Of course, people can use the cloud to do bad things, but that's in the control that the cloud customer has, and not the cloud provider. The cloud provider typically is better at it than you do. So if there are any mistakes, it's your problem, probably. And even though, yeah, well, just cut down on the jokes. So about the Cloud Security Alliance, one organization that has been pioneering cloud security. They've been doing it for a couple of years. You can go to their website, see that basically everybody of importance in the industry is a member of that consortium. So to say, they have research programs, educational programs, they have a professional certification, CCSK. I've been delivering CCSK more than 30 times now. They have a cloud provider certification, lots of members, big conferences. There's another conference coming up in the fall in Berlin. And if you want to meet me, you can go there. And then ISC Square, another company in the information security space. A little older than the CSA in a way, and most well known for the CISSP certification. And one of the people on the call had just passed CISSP. So, and anybody of you has passed CISSP professionally, please type it in the chat box, and then we can see what people we have on the call here. Then comes CCSP. So CSA was doing CCSK, Certificate of Cloud Security Knowledge. Then last year, the CSA and ISC Square started to collaborate on the Certified Cloud Security Professional. And that exam was opened last July, end of July, as a matter of fact. And 2 days after that, I actually did the exam. And a couple of weeks later, they told me I passed it. I'm probably one of the first people to pass the exam. And my application for being fully recognized as a CCSP is now in the works. So what is the contents of CCSP as a body of knowledge? Now here's a picture of the training in the facilitator's guide that I got because I wrote part of it. This is not in the bookshop yet. Funnily enough, this book does not even have an ISBN number. The formal book, and we'll get to that, is scheduled for November. So there are 6 domains there, and I'll cover each of these domains briefly in the next slides. So the first domain talks about cloud. So what is cloud really? How should you understand security in the concept of those cloud definitions? And that's just an elaboration of what I was just telling you, where the cloud gives you multiple ways of dividing up the responsibility for running software across partners in a supply chain, so to say. Now, there's a lot of that in this domain, and there's also a lot of, let's say, the private public cloud stuff in this domain. There's some design approaches on how you can do that. Now, domain 2 is about cloud data security. This talks about tracking data end to end, from beginning to end. And I always say, well, it used to be that data was born and decommissioned in your daddy's data center, whereas now it sort of flows around the world, and you occasionally have custody of it. And you need to understand that and see where your responsibility starts and where somebody else's responsibility starts. That's what the life cycle tells you. This domain also talks about storage architectures, about a ton of data security strategies and tools, both technical and managerial. It is a lot more extensive than this. Let's say that this domain is a lot more extensive than the corresponding domain in CCSK, is my experience. Then the third domain, cloud platform security. Actually, I wrote most of that. Let's see, we got just a second. We have a couple more people coming on board. Stick around for Q&A for those questions, especially Danielle. Okay, good. So I wrote this chapter and it just outlines all the components that make up cloud, and it has a section on disaster recovery and business continuity management techniques, so to say, or approaches. Then domain 4, I keep saying module, sorry about that. Domain 4, application security. This is some application architecture basics that are cloud specific, such as APIs, and it goes on about vulnerabilities. It talks about the software development lifecycle. I don't consider this particularly cloud specific. I know OWASP as a application service, a security platform was there before the cloud in a way, because it's web specific. But cryptography and identity and access management are a little bit more cloud specific, I think, in terms of its application area. So that's what this module talks about. And of course, you'll see some overlap between this and the data domain. Now, domain 5 is more about cloud operations. Part of that is really how do you run a data center? Again, most cloud consumers won't have the responsibility to do that, but they need to understand how they can check that somebody is doing that. And this is where all the operational processes also come in, like patch management, logging, monitoring, and tons of operational processes, incident response, etc., etc. In a way, business as usual, but it looks pretty much different when you spread it out over multiple patterns. It's a lot more complicated than just your daddy's data center, so to say. And then finally, domain 6 goes in a lot of detail on legal and compliance issues, including enterprise risk management, audit methodologies, and discusses some privacy regulations. There's great stuff in the material for you to learn. The questions on the exam are, you have to do the work, but I mean, you don't have to be a lawyer to do this. So that's about the 6 domains of CCSP. Now, the CCSP exam, if you really want to get the exam done, you go to a Pearson VUE testing center. They're all over the place, anywhere in the world. And this is a 4-hour, 125 multiple choice questions exam. It's a computer-based exam. You're not allowed to take any notes in there. You're not even allowed to, I think you can still take your watch, but not your cell phone. Most of these questions are multiple choice. Some of them are scenario-based, but the scenarios are not very long. It took me more than an hour to go through all those questions. I think 1.5 hours. And then I spent another hour reviewing my own answers and trying to make a note of the questions that I thought were silly. There were just a couple of them that were a bit silly. And then you have to pass for 700 out of 1,000, but that does not mean anything because they all have different weights. In the end, they don't even tell you how good you were. I mean, for what I know, I could have had a 100% score or a 700 or a 70% score. I don't know. That's apparently the way that ISC Square exams work. Now, the certification is just more than the exam. It's more like CISSP in a way. First you have to pass the exam, but you also have to demonstrate 5 years of IT experience, of which 3 in info security, and at least one of them in one of the 6 domains of the body of knowledge. Now, if you have CCSK, that you can kill the 1-year experience rule, and if you have CISSP, you have all the experience already. You have to be endorsed by an appropriate professional, somebody who probably has CISSP or something like that. And you have to have a maintenance fee, pay a maintenance fee every year. Much like CISSP as far as I know. And of course you have to be a member of ISC Square for all this. Now, why would you take CCSP and what else is there? Now, as I said, I didn't say that. I get people in my CCSK classes that have done CISSP, have CISMs, CRISC, and a few other IT security certifications. And they say that, yeah, we know a lot about security, but CCSK definitely adds value to that. And that's what they all say. Now, CCSP is beyond CCSK in a number of ways. There's a couple of things that are only in CCSK, but most CCSP is wider and deeper than CCSK. And as a certification, it has stronger experience requirements, because CCSK basically is an online exam that you can fill in with open book. CCSP is a little bit more strict, to say the least. What we're seeing currently is that you can. I'm actually working with the customers to do some kind of upgrade course for people that already have CCSK or equivalent and want to boost their knowledge up to the CCSP level. So this is a bit of a repeat of the previous slide. So according to CSA, you're well off by first doing CCSK and then CCSP. I think so too, in a way, although you might want to go for CCSP straight. But it still makes sense to be one of the people who have the #1 cloud security certification. CCSP has a better certification process, I think. You can be more sure that people actually passed it. And there's of course the maintenance, that you have to demonstrate that you're still up to date. And of course ISC Square in general is a much better recognized name in IT, let's say, certification. So that's your choice. This is just some of the background to that. Now, how do you do CCSP preparation? Well, I said it is early stages. CCSP is pretty new. Last July, the exam was opened. So, there are training options. Now, the list is growing. A couple of months ago, there were no training options at all. There's an instructor guide. There's no a student guide yet. And let's see, thanks for asking questions. I'll come back to that when we have the Q&A. So my plan personally as a trainer, I've been delivering CCSK training, full-time more or less. Well, not full-time, I have some other cloud training as well. My focus would be to deliver in-company CCSP training, primarily, not so much open class yet, on the basis of the ISC Square material, but I have a lot of my own courseware, and I've seen some of the courseware of ISC Square, and it's it's okay, but I don't think it gives the best learning experience. Of course, people are writing books. I'm not planning to write a book, but I do plan to. I am playing around with virtual and online learning. So, as I said earlier, I talk to clients right now about doing a sort of a bridge course from CCSK to CCSP. But if you think that your company would benefit, would have an opportunity for an in-company CCSP training for people who don't yet have that CCSK knowledge, then by all means, we can discuss that. The material is there. That's not the point. It's just how do you do that? Okay, here's the Amazon guide. You can actually pre-order the CCSP student body of knowledge. It's supposed to be delivered in half November, which reminds me of the fact that I still have to, finish off my card. Now, how do you convince your boss that you need to do stuff like this? Well, I think that in any IT organization, or even in any company that uses IT, which is basically every company, you need something like public and or private cloud to be more agile. You can't survive a company with having a bunch of servers in the basement. It's not going to work. Of course, your point could also be, hey, people in the company are already using it, which is 99% chance of being true. Suppliers are pushing it. This is also interesting. I talk both to customers and suppliers, even in the financial services industry, that say, well, stuff that used to be run on premise or stuff that used to be delivered as a CD, suppliers are now saying, listen, run it on our stuff. We take care of that. And security, proper security is like having good brakes on the car. They allow you to drive faster. I've once on a time, a long time ago, when I was a student, one of my youthful sins was that I drove in a car where the brakes were bad, and that learns you how to drive very, very, very slowly. And really, better brakes allow you to drive faster because you have less risk, really. Better brakes. Just let me make a note. This makes a good blog post, by the way. So the world is connected. That's another point, and the next slide will give us some backdrop to that. Infrastructure security, which is the way we used to do IT security, is no longer sufficient. You need to be better than that. And you can say, well, we run all our stuff in the private cloud. Well, if you study it a little bit, so we run it in the private cloud, so we don't need that much security, not that much cloud-based security. Well, think again. You may have more control, but you still have to apply that control in a proper way without killing the cloud benefits, because that's the other side of the coin. And finally, using cloud can be a compliance risk. So tying back to the second bullet and the third bullet, if you're already using it and you're using it improperly, you run a compliance risk. Okay, the question is, how about CCSP versus CISSP in order to convince your boss? Well, if you have a choice between CCSP and CISSP, then I think your consideration should first be, am I into a lot of infrastructure myself? Because in that case, CISSP makes more sense. If you're not, then the big advantage of CCSP is that I think it's a lot less work to get CCSP than CISSP. So it's not going to cost your boss so much money. And all the stuff that you will, well, that's hard to say that you get all the stuff that you need to secure your cloud, but you definitely have a very good handle on cloud, much better than you would have with CISSP. Although CISSP appears to be catching up in the latest releases, but it's never going to be where CCSP is right now. Okay, and then another thing, of course, that the CCSP security is backed by it's not like a fly-by-night certification where I could say, yeah, I wrote a course and I can certify that you passed my course. This is ISC Square, man. This is the real deal in a way. Okay, why cloud security? Why not? The new world is that everything is connected. On the left-hand side, you'll see your daddy's data center, so to say. And all which is, you can see, well, it's a metaphor, of course, but it kind of looks like some of the data centers. A couple of weeks ago, I was talking to to people at my older university, and we made a joke about the data center that they had there, and says, well, this data center doesn't look at all like the data center we used to have here, right? That any resemblance is superficial. Although the funny thing was that was a pretty concrete building in itself, so it kind of looked like it. That was a joke. And then on the right-hand side, we see the new world where everything is plugged into one gigantic net across the world. Infrastructure-centric security is no longer sufficient, period. So what's next? And then we'll move into some Q&A. If you want to do some training, then you could, and you want to have in-company training, then definitely talk to me. Your open classroom training, there is a lot of opportunity through the ISC Square website and the partners. I cannot vouch for the quality, although I know that one or two people that I respect are in that space. Anyway, if you want to know a little bit more about CCSP training, and you're taking this from the recording of the webinar, then this is the website you want to go to, cloudcomputing.com. Oh, hold on, I forgot to drop one slide, one bullet. There's no CCSK webinar next week. It's next month. So that brings me to Q&A, and one of the things I would like to have from you, and then I'll get into the chat questions first, is what kind of training option would be preferable to you? Okay, now let's run into some of the questions. So I have a non-cloud IT risk certification. Do you think that CCSK or CCSP is a value on add on that? Well, you don't really want to take my word for that, but as I said in one of the slides, I have multiple people with that certification. I had multiple people with that certification in my class, and they said, well, this definitely adds value. We now understand cloud a lot better. And of course, the fact that they did have some background in IT risk management, they will transfer that knowledge to CCSP and CCSK. So it will be easier on them, but there's definitely a lot of new stuff. Okay, yeah, I think the next question is about CCSP versus CISSP. I covered that. Does it make sense to first do CCSP and then upgrade to CISSP? Well, it is a path, but again, you have to think about what the value is that CISSP is going to bring to you. If you are, I have to be very honest about it. I have the CISSP book in my bookshelf, but I haven't gone through it in detail. There's a lot more physical security in CISSP, and if that's part of your job, then that's very relevant. If you're if you're not a cloud provider yourself, or even if you're just a PaaS or SaaS provider, then I don't think CISSP makes much sense beyond CCSP, I think. Okay, so the next question then, just keep those questions coming up, and if you want to speak out, it's also good. In the meantime, let me have some comments on your favorite training option. One of them is by Willem, who was a typical number of participants for an in-house training. Well, that's a business decision, and how many days would be needed. Well, we're currently planning upgrade classes that will last about 3 days. If it is in the Europe, then you would probably find that a minimum class size of 5 or 6 people would be necessary to make it economically viable. Outside of Europe, hiring me would be a little more, and of course it depends on the region where how you can compare it to other training options. But if you would have, and of course if you would have the full CCSP training, that would be more days, and then the business case typically gets a little better. Next question, and then anyway, if you have a specific example, just drop me a line, and let's see, and then we can discuss that offline. So I'm in application support at CCSP, suitable for my career. Well, application support is a pretty wide notion. I would have to know a little bit more about that. But generally speaking, application support will be cloud related. And depending on how, well, let's phrase it differently. I think that everybody in IT needs to be a lot more security aware than they currently are. IT security is becoming too important to leave to security staff. So everybody needs to have some basic understanding of that. And a lot of security controls, especially when you're using SaaS or PaaS, are about data protection and about functionality, are about, for example, about proper role management. So there's definitely, even on the, let's say, even if you're not that much into infrastructure, there's a good case to understand security. I hope that answers your question a bit. And then final question, or then the last question so far, is there any technology that you should study? Well, I'm not sure if I fully understand the question. The CCSP exam or certification is not very technology specific. As a matter of fact, it's not technology specific at all. I think here and there are some examples drawn from OpenStack, but and you are supposed to broadly understand some product names and categories, if I remember correctly. but you don't have to know the command. You don't have to know anything about the command line interface to VMware, not at all. Of course, it does make sense to have had some exposure to that, but that's more for you to be able to conceptually see what's going on rather than cramming technical details. CCSP is significantly less technical than CISSP, as far as I'm concerned. Then, of course, there was the question about the slides. What I will have available is a recording, and there's also a recording of the previous version of this, which was slightly different. I have put in more module description now. So by all means, that will be available in some way, shape, or form. It just needs a bit of crunching on Camtasia. Is the CCSP preparation book accurate enough to be ready to take the exam with options? I'm not sure what you mean by that. Or, well, my personal experience is that I read the instructor guide and then I passed the exam. But I went through the CCSK training about 35 times, so I'm biased in that respect. It really depends on your background. And we haven't figured out the proper training options for CCSP yet. For CCSK, I'm experimenting with I've been experimenting for a couple of years already with blended learning, where we have demonstrate things on real infrastructure, but also have preparation in advance. If you're smart and self-guided and experienced, then you can pass the exam by reading the book, but it's going to take you a couple of days, I think. I don't think that we need the bootcamp style that much as you might with the CISSP, where you have lots of tricky things around. What was one of those questions I remember? There are 3 or 4 encryption modes in triple DES. Which one would you use in which situation? That's a pretty technical question. CCSP is not like that. So this was more or less the Q&A session, and I want to tell you a little bit about some of the CCSK options I have, if you're interested. At any rate, I will send you a survey link in just a moment for you to evaluate the session. The reason why you would want to watch the session on CCSK is because my CCSP sessions might be similar. So CCSK training and learning options. If you're interested in CCSK maybe even as a startup to CCSP, it really helps you get going to that. I'm pretty sure. Potentially, you could say, well, let's do CCSK, and then with the book, I can cram in the rest. I have a virtual running in December. I'll explain the format in a moment. There's a classroom training in Utrecht, Netherlands, which is about half an hour from the Amsterdam airport. That starts November 3, but most of you are not from Europe, as far as I know. In company, as I said, talk to me or hang on after the call. And then there's more information on upcoming training on this URL. And there's also some non-security training there. Now, how do I do a virtual training? And I might do if I have enough interest, I might do a virtual CCSP training in the next couple of months somewhere. First, I do an intake survey that gives me some feel of where you are. Then, rather than having 8 hours on GoToMeeting every day, I have split this up in 5 sessions of 2 hours. And they're at the end of our afternoon, which I will get back to in a moment. You would have to do daily self-study outside the 2 hours. So your best bet would be to spend half a day for a full week on this. And then if you're lucky and fast, then you can do some of the exercises in that time as well. There's a private support site that has a ton of material. It's on a platform, it was on Udemy, but it's now on Teachable or some other similar learning management system. I'm getting more and more professional on that, scaling it up with self-tests, etc., etc. And if you do this with enough effort every day, then you should be able to pass the exam on the Saturday after that. So what's it look like in December? Okay, here's the topic list. I won't read that out. We're close to the top of the hour. Here's the time zone. It will be 3 o'clock UK time, which is 4 o'clock Western Europe at that time of the year. And I'm thinking I'm getting requests from other time zones. This basically is still doable on the west coast of the US. I do this a couple of times. I've done this a couple of times, and I had people from Los Angeles and San Francisco call in. Of course, it's early morning for them, like 7 or 8 o'clock in the morning, but that's doable. And now I also have people from New Zealand and Australia that would be interested in this. And for them, it's the middle of the night. So maybe I'm going to do this twice every day. So 2 sessions, one at 3 o'clock UK GMT time, and the other like 8 hours before that, or 8 hours or 6 hours after that. Let me know if that would be interesting to any one of you. And I could do twice. I can do 2 a day. So you might actually sit in both sessions every day if you want to. Again, there's more announcements will be following after this show, so to say. And I would say thanks for attending, and definitely fill in the survey form. You do have the link in the chat box. Can somebody validate that actually works?